So good morning, everybody. Welcome. Beginning of a new week, and we are ready to start the lesson in Zohar from the Torah portion of the BeMidbar, which is the beginning of a new book. It is the fourth book of the five books of Moses, as it's called. So it's the fourth book of the Torah, and it's the first Torah portion. And before we start the text itself, I want to just give you, by way of introduction, what it is that will be covered today. And that is that in the Torah itself, when it comes to the Torah portion of Genesis, there is a famous pasuk, a famous verse that God is creating the world, and over there, God uses a very interesting terminology when it comes to creation of man. In other words, when God was creating everything else, it just simply says, and God created, let there be this, let there be that, everything was God, 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 God. Suddenly it comes time to creation of man, and God says, let us make man. Okay? So the question becomes, what is this business of let us? Who is the us? Okay, until then it was just God. Okay, and furthermore, when it goes to elaborate about factually what happened, it says God created in Betsalmai in his image, Betsalem Elokim in the image of God. There is a redundancy in the words of the Torah. So it should have just said God created man. Okay, it wants to say in his image, fine. What does it mean in his image? In the image of Elohim. And again, what's the meaning behind saying, let us create man? So what we're going to learn, and it's explained by the writings of the Arizal as well, and relates to this part of the Zohar. The Arizal explains that when it came to creation of man, there was a special purpose. And that's why, as far as creation, the essence of man, God wanted it to be of a different makeup. And for that, God took into partnership, so to say, a part of everything else that was created in all the worlds. In other words, we have spoken about the four worlds, Atzilus, the world of Bria, the world of Yetzirah, and the world of Asiya, that when it came to the soul of man, there was a contribution, a part taken from each one of those levels and put into one entity called the soul of man, and that gave life to Adam and Eve. And what was the purpose for that? As explained by the Arizal, and in the books of Kabbalah and the Zohar talks about it, is in order to make sure that this creation, this man and woman, will be able to relate to all of God's creation, not just the physical world down here, but that Adam and Eve will have an understanding and will be able to see everything in all the upper worlds as well. They'll be able to relate to all the godly knowledge and wisdom that has been put into all the worlds. And in that manner, as Hasidus teaches us, Hasidic teachings, that a person who has been created in the image as a sum total of everything above, and we could relate to all the worlds above, therefore, we are able to have an effect on all the worlds above. So everything we do is not just isolated in our own personal life, something you did individually for yourself, but actually it has a ripple effect and a direct effect immediately throughout the entire process of creation from the top to the bottom. So not only we could affect it, but also we could get affected by the same process. In other words, whatever happens in the upper realms also has an effect on us. And if you recall, we learned in one of the previous classes where we said that that's why we have to be careful and know that everything that we do could actually create a unity amongst the spiritual levels above, or God forbid, it could drive a wedge between the unity that is supposed to be between the spiritual levels above. Mankind is able to, through his or her action, and everything that a person does actually make a difference in the upper realms. So if a person does what he or she's supposed to, then all the worlds will be in joy and happiness for that accomplishment. And if not, unfortunately, it will be the opposite. So with that, now let's go to the text. And if you have any questions, again, please unmute yourself and then ask the question. All right, so we are now in the text of Zohar, section 3, which is the Torah portion of BeMidbar, and it's page 117a. And I'll read the Hebrew, I'll translate, you could follow in the English as well. Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe b'midbar Sinai be'el Moed, and God spoke to Moses in the desert of Sinai, in the tent of meeting. And the verse, although it doesn't say it here in our Torah portion, which is the first verse of the Torah portion, finishes by saying the timing, that this was on the first day of the second month of the second year. So in other words, it's a year and 1 month after the Jewish people have left Egypt. So obviously they have already received the Torah. And this is when everything is taking place in this Torah portion. But Rabbi Abba Pasach, so Rabbi Abba started as an introduction to before he wanted to explain this verse, he gave an introduction and he said like this. It says in the verse in Genesis, Vayivra Elokim Esa Adam Betzalmoi. It says in the book of Genesis that God created Adam in his image. And he finishes the verse over there by saying, Betzelem Elokim Baro Esa, that in the image of God, he created him. And the verse finishes by saying, Zohar or Nekeva, a male and female, they were created. That's the verse from the Torah. Haikra, so now Rabbi Abba says, Haikra Itmar. So of course, this verse has already been explained by other sages, but now Rabbi Abba says, I want to explain it on a whole different level. Tochaze, come and take a look. At the time when God was created Adam Harishon, Adam, which the whole idea was that he should be the very purpose of creation, to connect all the worlds together and to understand them. So he made him in the image of all the upper worlds and the lower worlds. In other words, all the different levels of the world of Atzilus, the highest level that we have learned about, which is the first world that was created, the one that is closest to godliness and is the most purely spiritual world. It has 10 levels, as we spoke about, the 10 Sefirot. So there was sections, portions from each one given from their spiritual existence to Adam in order to enable it to have an understanding eventually, to be able to relate to higher levels of spirituality. And also from the lower levels of the world he was given. In other words, not only from the world of Atzilus, but there were certain components, certain levels from the world of Bria, the world of creation, the world of Yetzirah, the world of formation, and the world of Asiya, this world of action. Each one gave a certain part to Adam, so to say, to be able, and by thereby entire humanity, to be able to relate to the higher worlds. So Adam was included in him from everything, from all the worlds. So, and being that Adam Harishon was the super soul, in other words, from his soul is where all the other souls were taken. So that was the purpose for all the souls to come to the world. And his light was the light of Adam. Once he was created in the beginning, the spiritual light of his would emanate from one end of the world to the other end. In other words, from the highest level to the lowest levels. Why? Because he was like a pipeline that was being drawn through all of the worlds from the beginning, the highest level to the lowest one, and he was comprised of all the levels. And therefore, all creation was scared of him. What does it mean, all creation? It means in this world and in the other worlds. In this world, in the beginning, animals were afraid of Adam. They were afraid to even approach him. Why? Because he had an image of God on him. It was felt by all that he was created in the image of God. And to that end, we have had many stories of tzaddikim, of righteous people, which we're not necessarily going to go into now, but stories about how they were not harmed by wild animals, right? For example, the one of the more famous ones is Daniel, right? Daniel the prophet. He was thrown into a ditch of full of lions, a lion's den, and he was unharmed. Why was he unharmed? Because animals naturally attack something that is inferior to them. If they feel something, some creature, some whatever is superior to them, then they stay back. They're afraid to approach. So in the case of Daniel the prophet, the lions did not harm him in the lion's den. Why? Because what they saw was that image, godly image on him. True, he was a physical body and a person, but they felt that he is representing something higher. And there is many stories of that sort about various situations and various tzaddikim of high caliber that ended up being confronted with animals, and that the animals would completely be subdued. You have the story of King David, when he was one time going and suddenly he found himself on top, the Midrash says, on top of an animal, of a huge animal, which to him seemed like it was maybe a hill or a small mountain or something. He climbed up, and then this animal started moving. He was petrified. And at that point, a lion came by, and the lion suddenly bowed down, and the lion came, this animal, which King David was on top of, bowed down, and what happened? King David was able to come down. So in other words, you see that just like animals have this sense of what is superior to them, they bow down. Many times it has happened that they do it with tzaddikim. So here the Zohar is telling us that Adam, Adam Harishon, was on such a level where the godliness was clearly apparent on his face. He was created in the image of God. So therefore, not only in this world, but also even in the upper worlds, where it says that even Malachi Hashores, that the ministering angels wanted to say Kedusha in front of him. Kedusha is a prayer that we say usually in the synagogue. For example, let's say on the day of Shabbat, you may have heard it when we repeat the repetition of the silent Amidah. At a certain point, everyone stands up and everyone answers, Kodesh, Kodesh, Kodesh. We attribute holiness to God. So, again, in the beginning, Adam was created on such a level where even the angels wanted to say Kodesh in front of him. So the Afal Gav, Deha Ukbuha. So even though this topic has already been explained by other sages, Isli Sauka Be Behaikra. So we have to look into this verse more, the Zohar says. The fact that it says in the verse of Genesis of creation, it says, Vayivra Elokim es Adam betalmai, God created the man, Adam Harishon, Adam, in his image, Betzelem Elokim bara Isa, in the image of Elokim, he was created. So the Zohar asks, Kevan Dalmar Betalmai, since it says in the verse that it was created in his image, that means in the image of God, my Betzelem Elokim bara Isa, then what is this repetition in the pasuk that says, continues and says, in the image of Elokim he was created? So Elovadak Terein Dargin Dechlilon Dechar Benukba, but rather, surely this, the fact that repeats itself is because it's referring to two different levels that Adam was created. And these two levels are referring to the levels of male and female, meaning one terminology. The fact that says God was created in his image, that Adam was created in his image, that's referring to the level of a male. And where it says that B'Tselem Elokim, in the image of Elokim, was created, so that is referring to the female. So first of all, from here, by way of a light word, is if next time you wonder why your wife thinks she's God, because the Torah clearly refers to her as God, okay? So that's Elokim. God created Adam in the image of Elokim, and that refers to the female. So here, though, with joke to the side, what the Zohar is bringing out is like this, that because of the way Adam was created, where in him was included both sides of feminine and masculine, Adam and Eve, as you know, they were created together, and later God separated them. And the simple meaning, of course, it means literally male and female. And that's why physically down in this world, it ended up being translated into this creation being a male and a female. But the Zohar also explains here that these two levels of where it says God created Adam in his image, in the image of Elohim, is referring to two different levels in the world of Atzilus. It's referring to the levels of all the emotional attributes in the world of Atzilus, referred to as the masculine side, and also refers to the level of Malchus, the lowest Sephira in the world of Atzilus, which is referred to as the feminine side. And the Zohar continues, Ubegin kach, and because these two levels that are what we call Zun, or Zer Anpin, the small image, referring to the six attributes, emotional attributes, starting with kindness, severity, all the way down, but not including the last one, which is Malchus. Those six are called Zun, and corresponding to the level of the Zun, so there was two different combinations. Du Parzufin Habavadai. So there were two different levels that were created down here, corresponding to the two upper levels in the world of Atzilus. And the Zohar says, and you could see that clearly from the end of the verse in the book of Zohar that shows this, as it says, that male and female God created them. So when God was taking from all the worlds, let's go back to the beginning of what we were learning. The fact that God said, Nase, let us make man, right? So what is the us? The us is all the upper worlds that contributed part of their own level to creation of man. So man, so the soul of a man is able to relate to all the worlds. So therefore, when from the world of Atzilus, there was a contribution made, so to say, God took from the level of Ze'er Anpin, okay, Vin Nukvin. So there is the Ze'er Anpin, which is the six attributes of kindness, severity, and beauty, and continued with the next three. That's called Ze'er Anpin, what's called the small face. And then there is the Nukvin, which is referred to the level of Malchus, being referred to as the female because it receives from the upper levels of Atzilus. The two of them together, Zer and Pin, the Nukvin, are put together, and an abbreviation in Kabbalistic terminology is called Zun. So Zer Anpin Ven Nukvin. That means the six emotional attributes plus the bottom one Malchus together. That's called Zun. You could take a note on that because these things will come up again. Zer Anpin is the first six, and the seventh one, which is the level of Malchus, is called Nukvin, the female. These attributes are given because the upper six are the giver. They flow down God's light into the lower one, which is Malchus. So, and Malchus is the one receiving it. So, in allegorically speaking, it's considered to be like a husband and a wife, husband giving and the wife receiving in Kabbalistic terminology. So the Zohar continues, V'af al gav the nukba achidas besitroi. So here we're talking about where God created male and female, right? That's Adam and Eve. So that means there is each one separate. At least that's the way we're talking about it. But the Zohar says, but one second, when Adam was created, as you may have learned, is that he was created together with the female, all as one entity. So he nome klala mitrein setrin lemeve shalim bekaila. He nome klala mitrein setrin lemeve shalim bekaila. That the Zohar explains that it's true, but each one, even though God later separated them, but each one had a component of the other one. So when Adam was created, him representing male, but nonetheless, a component of the female was in him as well. And Chava, who was the female, also had components of male so that they could be complete each one and they could relate to each other. So true, the emphasis of the makeup, spiritual makeup of each one was different. And that's why physically that creation also was different between male and female. But nonetheless, they're both comprised of everything that the other one also has. The only question is which one is the emphasis? What components are the emphasis? And that separates and differentiates between one and the other. Any questions so far? If you have any questions, again, please just unmute yourself and ask your question. So now what happened? Once Adam was created in this blueprint of what God wanted, in a way that uh, everything through the entire creation, from the upper spiritual worlds that are completely spiritual, Atzilus, Bria, Yitzira, and even the lower worlds of Asiya, they should all have, so to say, a portion, a hand in it, or some component contributed from them, so that this mankind, this Adam, could be someone in existence that could relate to everything, the entire creation. So so at that point, when Adam was created, he was able to look through his mind, the wisdom. His wisdom was able to be applied to perceive everything in the higher worlds, in all the spiritual worlds, and in the lower world. In other words, not just nature, which he was able to see with his physical eyes, but also have an understanding of everything that goes on in this physical world. But also, with his mind, he was able to understand everything in the upper worlds. So now you may say, what happened? If that was the case, that sounds unbelievable. So what went wrong? Came the Sarah, however, once Adam and Eve committed the sin with the tree of knowledge, is matu parsufin. So that's the action of Adam and Eve. As you recall, as I explained before, a person's action has an effect in the upper worlds. It actually reverberated and created a wave in the upper worlds where things got changed in the world of Atzilus and all the way down. What happened was that through their action, which to us may seem something very simple, but this was the first time that they disobeyed God's commandment. It was the first time that anyone disobeyed God's commandment, and thereby this was had a major effect. So in the world of Atzilus, the Sefirot of the world of Atzilus themselves actually had a lowering of status. They got dragged down. So therefore, once there was a lowering of the status of, was the levels of spirituality of the Sefirot of Atzilut got affected, it had a domino effect in everything underneath, in all the worlds, all the way down to this world. And therefore, the Chokmasa is the Lokas Minei. As a result, in this world, also Adam himself became affected. And the wisdom that he had, the opening of his eyes to be able to perceive godliness and understand everything, it all was suddenly diminished and taken away. And from that point on, all he was able to comprehend and understand was matters that had to do with his body, in other words, with the physical world. So that was a great tragedy that happened at that point, where it completely changed the way the world was set up. And it deviated from the way the world was meant to exist. So after that, Adam, who was no longer on this pristine pedestal anymore and didn't no longer represented the highest level of being a person, he had fallen, so to say. So he had children. And he had children from what the Zohar calls from the upper world and the lower world. What does that mean? So he had two sons, Hevel and Cain, right? Cain and Abel. And Hevel was from the upper worlds. In other words, his soul was from a very high spiritual level. And you had Cain, whose soul came from a lower world, from a level of impurity. Why? Because unfortunately, Adam and Eve, through their action, had already now introduced impurity into the world. So now it was all mixed up. Everything in the world was mixed up, purity and impurity. So they ended up having two children, one which was pure of origin and acted purely, and then the other one whose soul had unfortunately been affected by levels of impurity and therefore acted that way in this world. And these two, the two children, couldn't coexist together, and therefore one got up and killed the other one. Hevel got killed, and Cain's descendants eventually actually all died in the Mabul, in the flood of Noah. Ad the Olid Bar Umine Ashtil Alma. So after those two, what people may not know is that Adam and Eve eventually ended up having a third child, and his name was Shais, and it was from him that the world got reestablished again. And this topic, the Zohar says, has already been discussed by the sages. The Zohar continues, Ve'im kol da, and even though this third son was born, which was a son that was able to contribute to the reestablishing of the world, and great strides were made. The world moved forward, but nonetheless, the world la ishtalim was not perfected to the level that God wanted. V'lo havishlim v'lo ishtekach b'kiyumei, and it did not come out to survive, so to say, and be able to recover from the generation of the flood. Ad also Abraham ve'iskayom alma, until Abraham came along and he brought solid foundations to the world, and he brought rejuvenation to the world so that it could exist. He brought new existence to the world. Avallah ishtalim. But even then, even Abraham, who came in and he brought in and he represented the level of chesed, of kindness to the world, to everybody. And he started bringing some awareness of godliness into the world, but the world was still not where God wanted it to be. So the achid baby mina command the achid b'minei laman the nofil. So even though Abraham was the one that came and acted like somebody who is holding the hand of someone that has fallen, that was the world that has fallen. Abraham did everything he could, but it was still not complete. Also Yitzchak. So then came Isaac, his son. The achid b'dei the alma b'smala. So if Abraham represented the right, meaning chesed, kindness, Isaac represented the left, means severity, fear. And Isaac also brought the world to a higher level, utilizing the level of severity, the level of fear, teaching the world that they have to fear God. Besides loving God, they also have to fear God. And he accomplished whatever he accomplished. Vizkayom Yasir. So the world had a more of a solid existence, even more than the times of Abraham. Okay, when also Yaakov, when Jacob came to the world, Ochid b'mtza'iso begufa. So he, as you know, Yaakov represented not the right and not the left, not just kindness, pure kindness, and not just pure severity, but he had the middle ground. He had a good mixture of both, which is called tiferes, beauty, because it's the perfect mixture. And he was able to accomplish the unbelievable. And he was able to take both sides, put them together. So now the world had even more of a secure existence, and it wasn't as shaky as before. But nonetheless, with all of this, the world was not still completely established the way it should be, to exist the way it was meant to be. At the Oli Teresa Shvatim, until the 12 tribes were born, that's the 12 sons of Jacob, Veshiv in Nafshon, and the 70 people, the 70 souls that came, all descendants of Yaakov were born. And in these were included the entire Jewish nation. In other words, the 12 sons together, their soul was a very special soul. And each one is what we call the general soul or a super soul. So all the souls of the Jewish people that were to come in the generations after that were all included, each one like a spark within the souls of the 12 tribes, the 12 sons of Jacob. So, Vishtalim Alma. So then, once these 12 tribes were born, that was a new phase of existence, of stability for the world spiritually from that point on. And nonetheless, with all of this, the world was still not the way it was supposed to be. At the Kabila Yisrael Oraiso Betura de Sinai, until the Jewish people accepted the Torah at Mount Sinai, Veitokam Mashkena, and also the Mishkan, the tabernacle, the mobile house that was built for God, was erected. That through the establishing of the tabernacle, that's when Kedain is Kayomu Almin Vishtelimu. Then all the worlds were now in a complete mode. They came to completion. Veispesomu Iloin Vesatoin. And now there was that pleasant smell, allegorically speaking, in the upper worlds and the lower worlds. In other words, the the Torah by itself started a new period and a new phase for not just the Jewish people, but for the entire world. And the Torah by itself, though, got really established and finished as far as having its effect when the Mishkan, when the tabernacle was created. Why is that? So Hasidic teachings have, there's a lot about this, and Hasidus teaches us that the entire purpose of the creation of the world was so that we could transform this physical world and make something a dwelling place for God. To that end, of course, we need to have the awareness, the understanding, the dedication that we want to accomplish it. So that is what the Zohar was just explaining, that awareness, understanding, and dedication became more solidified as each generation. There was Abraham, there's Isaac and Jacob, and then the 12 sons, and then there was the entire Jewish nation. So now you had the people that had the awareness and understanding of where this world is going, what was the purpose, where are we coming from, as opposed to the rest of the world that forgot what our beginning and what the purpose of creation was. So once you had the people, now there had to be the how, and that was the Torah, the commandments. The commandments gave us a practical way, the tools to be able to tie down godliness into this physical world, to be able to anchor it down in a way where the physical world by itself becomes holy. That could only be done, the elevation of physicality, through something that God gives us as a tool, enables us to do it. Otherwise, we're just physical people. How could we elevate the physicality of the world? So through the 613 commandments, which is the will of God, where godliness could flow through these commandments in whatever way they've been given to us, whether it's the eating, how we eat, whether it's the living, whether it's getting married, whether it's the days, the day of Shabbat, the holiday, all the 613 commandments. Each one is actually the formula which God in his kindness has shared with us how to elevate the world, change the world, and to take it back all the way to the time before Adam and Eve made that mistake. So in other words, we have the power to elevate the world to the highest level. But even then, we see that not only it took till people had the awareness and understanding as the Jewish people, as a nation, but not only the fact that they were given the tools, but the tools by themselves, it's just ideology. They have to be applied. And therefore, the building of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, where it became part and parcel of the Jewish nation. It was established within the heart of the camp itself, and it was a daily process. So now this represented the true anchoring down of godliness. In the books of Kabbalah and mysticism, there is a tremendous amount that has been written about the various components of the tabernacle, which eventually became the Beis Hamikdash, the temple in Jerusalem, in the way of how they represent different aspects of the world. In other words, everything, every detail about the tabernacle, the walls, the coverings, the menorah, the altar, the ark, and exactly how many, the measurements of each one, and how many branches it should have, the menorah, and how this is done and how that is done. Each one represents another aspect of the world, its creation, and therefore, as long as the Mishkan, and in particular the Beis Hamikdash, the temple, was still standing and functioning, there was a certain sense of balance spiritually and physically that was going on in this world. And ever since that stopped, suddenly, truly, as far as spiritual, the world took a dive. So the fact that the service in the temple and in the Mishkan used to happen, it used to contribute to the stability of the world. And that is something which other nations of the world also had realized. And as a matter of fact, in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, other nations of the world would also send sacrifices to be offered in order to, to bring peace and tranquility as they understood it to the world and to their countries and so on and so forth. So now let's continue with the Zohar. Kevan, the Oraisa Umashkina Itokamu, once the Torah was given and the temple was established, we're talking about the tabernacle in the desert. So that's when HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God, wanted to count the army of the Torah. In other words, to know kama chayolin inun deoraisa, to know the number of the soldiers that are going to be now busy learning Torah and who deserve to receive the Torah. Kama chayolin inun demashkena, and also what is the number of the soldiers in God's army, so to say, that that now will be deserving the tabernacle, and that the presence of God will be residing over them. So here, I want to first of all open up to see if there is any questions about everything that we have learned so far. I know we discussed some heavy subject matters here as far as creation of the world and Adam and Eve and the makeup of a person prior to the sin of the tree of knowledge and after the sin of tree of knowledge.
So, Rabbi Danny, can I
Yes.
ask you
Yes.
regarding Adam and Eve and the sin? It was so bad that there wasn't any way, any form of redemption or anything that or what did Adam realize once they realized they committed the sin? There was no going back.
That's a great question, and it's a very heavy question. So first of all, step by step to answer from level one and working our way further, the answer is it was a very, very heavy sin. Um, Now you may say, oh, come on, they just ate something, which by the way was not an apple. Okay, that's just a misconception and a mistranslation, because in Latin the word apple and sin happen to be the same word. So somehow in Christian writings, they started promoting that it was an apple. It had nothing to do with apple. There is different commentaries as to what it was, and none of those are actually apple. We're talking about perhaps figs or wheat and so on and so forth. So anyhow, going back to that, so it wasn't true. To us, it may be, hey, listen, they just happened to take a fruit from a tree. Is it that terrible? So I want to take you back to the stories of the Torah, in particular about Moses, where Moses seemingly, when he, for example, came and he had the staff in his hand, and God told him, go ahead and bring water from the rock, right? And he ended up through hitting the rock. Now, instead of just telling the rock for water to come out, and suddenly that was considered to be a terrible thing for him, and it was added to a list of why he should not go to the Holy Land. Moses prays hundreds of prayers, and no can do. God says, no, you're not going in. So, what's the deal? What's going on? Was that really such a terrible sin? So the answer is that people like Moses are on a whole different level. They are not, let me use myself because maybe you are on the level of Moses. After all, it says there's a spark of the soul of Moses in every single person. But if I were to forget something, okay, no. So what's the big deal? The rabbi forgot. Let's forgive it. Let's not hold it against him. Okay, but I'm not Moses. Moses was given special tools, special powers, and therefore God had a whole different level of expectation. So again, here when we're talking about, let's compare. We are descendants of Adam and Eve, but we just learned the level of spirituality, of understanding that Adam had when he was created. Imagine everything we're learning on these Sunday classes in Zohar. Imagine if you were born with all that knowledge. I mean, we haven't even learned the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Kabbalah and mysticism and Hasidic teachings. But imagine that Adam was created the day he opened up his eyes as an adult. He already had the entire knowledge and understanding of everything that we will ever want to understand or realize that we don't understand. Whatever there is to know, godliness, spirituality, everything, how the world was created, how it functions. For somebody like that to go ahead and not do what God wanted, a simple task. Yeah, for Adam, this was a very, very grave mistake. Now, just to put another interesting spin into it, but it's a discussion for a different time, and that is, don't think this was by happenstance. Being that the entire creation of the world was something planned by God, everything in our life is planned by God. So what do you think? Adam and Eve eating from the tree of knowledge wasn't programmed by God. That was also God's doing. There was a purpose to that too. Yeah, they took the fall for it. They took the blame because after all, they had freedom of choice. They shouldn't have done it. But even that was destined to happen. Why? Because as Chassidus explains, is once there was this lowering of the world, as we just learned in today's Zohar, it became the task and the very purpose of creation of the world and us, the Jewish people, to engage the world and elevate back all the sparks of holiness that fell lower, for us to lift them up back to their original place. That was the very purpose of the creation of all the worlds. So in a way, yes, there was a going off the track by Adam and Eve. But in the bigger picture, that was not even going off the track. That was exactly being on track. Because God wanted, the purpose of creation was not to begin with that it should be a perfect paradise, but something that we, the souls, are going to elevate and bring up to that level. So for all the generations since then, that's what we've been busy doing. Making up for it, elevating the world back to where it was during the 6 days of creation, at which point will be the time of coming of Mashiach, God willing. Okay?
Thanks.
Pleasure. Yes, Beth.
Was Adam a tzaddik?
That's a great question. So being that Beth also in the Tanya class, so she's uh, infatuated with the level of tzaddik. Um, so the answer to that is it's interesting. From one side, you could say he didn't work hard to get there, right? He was born with that level. On the other hand, practically speaking, yeah, he at that point he was just only spirituality, and that was his only focus. Which,
Before the sin.
yeah, so yes, you could say that to begin with, he was on the level of a tzaddik, which, by the way, brings about two side points. It is possible for people to be born with a soul that is predisposed to being a tzaddik. Okay, so we don't all have the same starting points. We all have the potential, of course, to be tzaddikim, but some may have already a leg up spiritually when they're born, depending on where their soul was drawn from, where it came from. That's as far as that first point. The other thing is that we see this was a unique setup where Adam actually released the levels of impurity into the world. So even though to begin with he himself was benefiting from that pristine level, but by releasing the levels of impurity into the world, he affected, and this goes back to answer um, the question that Larry asked. What's the big deal? So he had something. He had if it was a fruit, or some people say it was a fig. Is it really that terrible? I don't know. So the answer is the outcome affected the entire world. So imagine that by his action, as we learned in the Zohar, he caused the lowering of all the sefirot, starting from the top all the way down to the level where even in this physical world, whereas as we know, many things in this physical world lend themselves to be sometimes bad, sometimes good, and some things are really bad, always. They're evil. There is evil in this world. So the person that was responsible for unleashing all of this was Adam and Eve. So it wasn't just a small thing, no big deal. I just, I put a hole into where I'm sitting in the boat. What do you care? I created a little hole under my own seat. What is it bothering you? No, you're causing the entire boat to sink. So everybody else now is suffering for it too. It's just like on an airplane, right? Uh, if you decide that you want to smoke, what's the big deal? So you want to smoke for yourself. But the second you land, the feds will be waiting for you. Why? What do you mean? What are you, crazy? It's not just you. It's an entire plane. It's hundreds of people. What you do affects everybody. So that was exactly the same thing that happened with Adam. What he did not only affected him and his family and his surrounding, not only he got kicked out from that luxury penthouse called paradise that he was living in, but the entire world ended up suffering for it. And even the physical world, right after that, God says even the earth will from this point on not function the same because of what you did, right? So it was a major thing, and hey, we're still paying for it to this day. But hopefully we're done with it. Any day, it's all done, and Mashiach is coming. All right, wonderful. Any other questions?
Rabbi, I couldn't find the materials to download.
Okay, I will post it one more time in the chat section. And if you don't see it, I just downloaded it. If you don't see it, well, I should say I uploaded it to the chat section. If you don't have it, let me know, and I could either send it to you via WhatsApp or email or whatever you wish.
Email would be great. I still cannot see it. Yep.
Sure, I'll do that. Okay. So that's for today. Any questions, Dave?
No, thank you, Rabbi.
Pleasure. All right, Zach, everybody. And by the way, don't forget on Tuesday evening, 7 p.m., we're going to have the special lecture, which is what's wrong with the 10 Commandments, where we're going to watch together some snippets of the movie 10 Commandments, which is a classic, and discuss how it is teaching us actually the wrong information about what really happened. Hollywood wants to sensationalize everything, but we didn't need it. The original story was fantastic enough. Okay, they didn't need to distort it in these matters, but we're going to get to the bottom of it and learn what really happened.
What time is that? 7 o'clock?
Yes, Tuesday, 7 p.m.
Thank you.
Okay? All right. Take care, everybody. Have a wonderful week.
You,
Thank you.
you too, Rabbi. Thank you. Bye-bye.